Hi, for this story, I'm sat in a really quaint little cottage in the Peak District. If you've just watched one of my other videos, then I've just read a couple of Mr. Men books, and this is a follow-on. I'm sat in a little alcove. This is a cheeky little alcove, and I couldn't resist to read one of the stories from here. So, this story I'm going to read is Jemima Puddleduck from Peter Rabbit and Friends. Jemima Puddleduck was annoyed because the farmer's wife would not let her hatch her own eggs. Jemima's sister-in-law, Mrs. Rebecca Puddleduck, was perfectly willing to leave the hatching to someone else. I have not the patience to sit on a nest for 28 days, and no more have you, Jemima. You would let them go cold, and no you would, she said. I wish to hatch my own eggs. I will hatch them all by myself, quacked Jemima. Jemima decided to make a nest right away from the farm, set off along the cart road that leads over the hill. She was wearing a shawl and a poke bonnet. When she reached the top of the hill, she saw a wood in the distance. She thought that it looked a safe, quiet spot. Jemima Puddleduck was not much in the habit of flying. She ran downhill, flapping her shawl, and then she jumped into the air. She flew beautifully when she got a good start. Jemima saw an open place in the middle of the wood. She landed rather heavily and began to waddle about in search of a convenient dry nesting place. She rather liked the look of the tree stump amongst some of the tall foxgloves, but seated upon the stump was an elegantly dressed gentleman reading a newspaper. The gentleman raised his eyes above his newspaper. "Madam, have you lost your way?" he asked. Jemima explained that she had not lost her way, but that she was trying to find a convenient dry nesting place. "Ah, is that so indeed?" said the gentleman with sandy whiskers, looking curiously at Jemima. He folded up his newspaper and put it in his coat-tail pocket. "I have a sack full of feathers in my woodshed. No, my dear madam, you will not be in nobody's way. You may sit there as long as you like," he told Jemima. He led the way to a dismal-looking house amongst the foxgloves. "This is my summer residence. You would not find my winter house so convenient," said the hospitable gentleman. He opened the door and showed Jemima in. Jemima Puddleduck was rather surprised to find such a vast quantity of feathers, but it was very comfortable, and she had made a nest without any trouble at all. When Jemima came out, and sandy-whiskered gentleman was sitting on a log reading the newspaper. At least he had it spread out, but he was looking over the top of it. He was so polite, and he seemed almost sorry to let Jemima go home for the night. He promised to take great care of her nest until she came back the next day. Jemima Puddleduck came every afternoon. She laid 9 eggs. They were greeny white and very large. The foxy gentleman admired them immensely. He used to turn them over and count them when Jemima was not there. At last Jemima told him that she intended to begin to sit the next day. "I'll bring a bag of corn with me so that I need to leave my nest until the eggs are hatched." "They might catch cold," said conscientious Jemima. "Madam," said the foxy gentleman, "I beg you not to trouble yourself with a bag. I will provide oats. But before you commence your tedious sitting, I intend to give you a treat. Let us have a dinner party all to ourselves." He asked Jemima to bring some herbs from the farm garden to make a savoury omelette, sage and thyme, and mint and 2 onions, and some parsley. "I will provide lard for the stuff, lard for the omelette," he added. Jemima Puddleduck was a simpleton. Not even the mention of sage and onions made her suspicious. She went round the farm garden, nibbling off snippets of all the different sorts of herbs that are used for stuffing roast duck. Jemima waddled into the kitchen and got 2 onions out of a basket. The collie dog, Kep, met her coming out. "What are you doing with those onions? Where do you go by yourself every afternoon?" he asked. Jemima told Kep the whole story. He grinned when she described the polite gentleman with sandy whiskers. Kep asked several questions about the wood and about the exact position of the house for the shed. Then he went out to look for the 2 foxhound puppies. When she reached the shed, the bushy-tailed gentleman was sitting on a log, glancing uneasily around the wood. Jemima Puddleduck went up the cart road, rather burdened with bunches of herbs and 2 onions in a bag. Come into the house as soon as you've looked at the eggs. Give me the herbs for the omelette. Be sharp, he said abruptly. Jemima felt surprised and uncomfortable. Someone with a black nose sniffed at the bottom of the door and then locked it. Jemima became much alarmed. While she was inside, she heard the pattering of feet round the back of the shed. A moment afterwards, there were the most awful barking, baying, growls, howls, squealing and groans, and nothing more was ever seen of that foxy-whiskered gentleman. Presently, Kep opened the door of the shed and let out Jemima Puddleduck. Unfortunately, the puppies rushed in and gobbled up all the eggs before Kep could stop them. He had a bite on his ear, and both the puppies were limping. Jemima Puddleduck was escorted home in tears on account of those eggs. She had laid some more in June, and she was permitted to keep them herself, but only 4 of them hatched. Jemima Puddleduck said that it was because of her nerves that she had always been a bad sitter. The end. I hope you enjoyed that story. Now, as I say, I'm sat in this really lovely, quaint little cottage, and first of all, when I saw this little alcove, I thought it's a perfect location to read a story. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for joining me.